Good morning and welcome to the March edition of the Coffee Talk. And this is Ross. I'll be your host for today. I'm an e-learning instructional designer with the training and development side of the SSIS user support team, part of the business operations and business integration division of DHS. We'll get started today with the agenda. We'll do introductions as folks start their portion of the presentation. They will introduce themselves, let you know who they are. We'll go through the housekeeping. We'll go through the Tennyson warning because we are recording this. We'll go through the mentor of the month, and then we'll start the SSIS admin portion of the webinar, including specifically departments, locations, units, roles and functions, user profiles, and credentials. And then we'll have some closing announcements that you'll want to hold on for. So as usual, you will be muted upon entry, but you can still get a hold of us. To speak, please raise your hand, use the reaction emoji at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be unmuted by one of our panelists. Questions can also be submitted using the chat feature, which will be monitored by SSIS Business Ops staff. Closed captioning can be enabled using the CC button located on the bottom left of your screen. And again, this session is being recorded and it will be posted on the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy website in about 7 to 10 business days. Here's the Tennyson warning. Go ahead and take a moment or two to read this, and I'll come back as soon as I've given you a chance to read through it and you understand what you're in for. Okay, hopefully that was enough time for you to read through the Tennyson warning. I'm gonna pass off to Heidi to talk about the mentor of the month.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Of course, this is my favorite part of the entire presentation when we get to recognize one of our very awesome mentors as Mentor of the Month. And this month's mentor is Carlton County's Lisa Weffelmeyer. Lisa was nominated by her colleague Denise Mycannon. And Denise, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your last name correctly. Denise shared with us that Lisa, quote, is so knowledgeable and always willing to drop whatever she is doing to help people not only find information, but she will teach them to find it so they can be more self-sufficient in the future. This is exactly what a mentor should do. She is helpful in every way and is always respectful when teaching others how to use SSIS to a greater extent. Not once are you ever made to feel inadequate for not knowing how or where to look for information. In addition, she frequently finds and shares information regarding programs and how to apply that information to SSIS applications. All in all, she is an amazing mentor. Unfortunately, Lisa's supervisor, Rhiannon Carey, wasn't able to join us this morning, but she echoed Denise's sentiment and praised Lisa's work as an SSIS mentor. So congratulations and thank you, Lisa. And if any of you have someone that you would like to nominate as Mentor of the Month, please send me an email with a short paragraph sharing that person's contributions. And we will review your nomination and get back to you. So anyway, I'll put my name in my email in the chat for those of you who have somebody you would like to nominate, and we accept those nominations at any time. So anyway, I hope all of you have a great day, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. And Ross, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Heidi. Up next, we'll have Cynthia talking about the new staff in our department.
All right. Thank you so much, Ross. And again, many thanks and congratulations to Lisa for being Mentor of the Month. So this morning, we really wanted to just highlight all of the fantastic new staff that we've been able to bring on to SSIS business operations and user support here at DHS. We have been thrilled to be able to add on two new members for our Tier 1 Help Desk, Annie and Luann. They've both joined us from local agencies. I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with both of them. And we're just thrilled to have them on board and to be able to expand our help desk team. And we're also welcoming 5 new subject matter experts to our section as well. We have Andrea, who is a worker SME focusing on SSIS administration. Holly, who is a fiscal SME focusing on 4E, child foster care report. Allie, who is a worker SME focusing on child welfare and federal reporting. Erica, who's a child welfare SME focusing on the front end of child protection. And Michelle, who is also a worker subject matter expert, and she's focusing on kinship and adoption work. So we're thrilled to be able to have folks here to provide additional support and really, really just be able to provide a increased level of support for everybody around the state, as well as really increase our ability to work with policy and our minute partners and so forth for current projects and for modernization as well. So we are thrilled to have these additional staff, and honestly, it feels like they've all been here for a long time, even though they're all fairly brand new. So welcome to everybody. And if you have any questions about staff or what's going on in the section, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Cynthia, and welcome new staff. Let's go ahead and get started on today's presentation. Is that Eric up next or Annie?
Yeah, I thought Cynthia had another slide that it's not appearing in the presentation. So sorry, Cynthia.
No worries.
Did you want to talk a little bit about the review that's going on right now?
Sure, I can. I'll just go on screen a little bit. I wanted to just share with folks that as everybody is aware, we're in the middle of this legislatively agreed upon review of child protection and SSIS. And we are completing review on 6 different focus areas. And that includes listening sessions with caseworkers, as well as with our policy partners, and then field by field review of every input for the different focus areas. So we have completed 4 and are just working on kinship and adoption, and those areas will be done in April. And on May 3rd, we're going to have a report out, really initial feedback for the entire review. And I really want to be clear that that review also does include all of the feedback and information from mentors and coordinators across Minnesota over the past year. We really want to be inclusive. And so I want to thank everybody. We've gotten feedback and really from everybody, whether it's just been an issue, a concern, something that's come up at a Thursday technical meeting, or really any other area. All of that is included in the review. And we just really appreciate your work and dedication and willingness to partner with us and letting us know what's what. It's really appreciated, and we hope you feel for the feedback session in May, we hope that we're really capturing all of that information. If folks have any questions about that, again, always feel free to reach out to Help Desk and or to me or Heidi, anybody on the team, and we'll get the information where it needs to go. So thank you, everybody.
Great update. Thanks again, Cynthia. We'll now pass it on to Eric to start the presentation.
All right. Thanks, Cynthia. And thanks to all of the new subject matter experts and resident subject matter experts for conducting that review. It's much needed. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Eric Kratz, and I'm a supervisor here for our user support team. That's our Tier 1 help desk, as well as our learning and development team. And today we're going to talk about the SSIS admin application in SSIS. When I look through SSIS admin, I don't see a lot of help text. So SSIS admin can be sort of a mystery. Today, we're going to offer you sort of an SSIS admin 101 to go over users, units, locations, and departments. And it's going to read a little bit like a training. So if this is, basic for some of our mentors out there, I understand if you have other things to do, but we do have quite the turnover of mentors every year. So we do feel like we should reintroduce, newer mentors to these functions in SSIS administration. So welcome everybody. As you know, SSIS admin contains many important areas of responsibility and management. In your agency, you have one or more people appointed as the security administrator. Security admin staff focus on security, setup of new users and workers, and their functions and roles. And we're going to go through some different tasks and information using the SSIS application so you can see the screens and options as we talk about these different topics. Not all mentors and coordinators have the rights to SSIS admin. We do understand that. But even if you don't have the rights, as a mentor, you are one of the first people that your admin staff will contact if they have questions about SSIS. SSIS admin is highlighted on the slide here. Some of the things that we're going to talk about over the next two webinars contains general agency information and where it's entered for departments, locations, units, and roles. It's where SSIS users are set up. It's where special cost codes and special studies and county subservice codes are set up. It's where you find information about programs, services, activities, and staff provided rates. It's where your interfaces are set up with other systems. And it's where county preferences are set up, such as yearly settings and retention schedules. So the way that this webinar is going to work today is we're going to read slides, or we're going to do some demonstration via slides, and we've also have some live demonstration within the system to show actual functionality. And we have Andrea Bloom, a brand new subject matter expert, who's going to kick us off.
Thank you, Eric. So department lists enable the hierarchy of an agency. Agencies may have one or multiple departments. Once a department list is made, users can be added or removed from a list at any time. Departments can be deleted as long as there is not any records associated with this department.
Let's go ahead and log into our SSIS administration training environment and talk a little bit more about departments. From the SSIS Worker Fiscal application, we're going to navigate up to the Tools option in the Windows menu toolbar. From the drop-down, for those of us who have Administer System assigned to our role, we'll be able to see an embolded SSIS Administration option in the drop-down. I'm going to select that to open up the SSIS Administration application. Once we're logged into the SSIS Administration application, we'll note that there is a key in the upper left-hand corner, as well as the words SSIS Administration, followed by a series of options in the Windows menu toolbar. In today's webinar, we're going to be talking a lot about lists and create. As you can see under the Create option in the Windows menu toolbar, individuals are able to create many new things, such as new departments, new locations, new roles, and new units. But as with most things in SSIS, we suggest that you look at existing information before you create a new record. Let's first take a look at the department list. As you can see, this contains a current list of all of the departments we have entered into SSIS for our agency. Many agencies out there will have multiple departments, and the list may extend beyond what you can see in this field. You can expand this by coming up here and selecting the Maximize option, or you can use the search box over here to search for existing departments in alphabetical order, simply by typing into the search field. Since we have a limited amount of departments in our training environment, we're just going to explore some of the functionality around departments. As you remember, departments establish the hierarchy of the organization. We're going to go ahead and look at social services first. So I just double clicked on that. I did that a little too quick. So one way we can get into this social service is by selecting edit to edit the social services department, or simply by double clicking on it. When we double click on it, we look up here at the top. We have the name of the department listed here, as well as the agency associated. In our training environment, we have Polk County associated as our agency. And as you can see, you see many assigned users to this particular department with a scroll bar. And underneath that, you see assigned units to the social services department. Now you can add or remove users from the department level. To add, you would select the add button and a alphabetical list of users will show up. Multi-select functionality is available in all of the lists in SSIS administration. And you can do that by selecting your control button on your keyboard and multi-selecting individuals to add into your department. We'll talk a little bit more about adding users to departments a little bit differently as we progress through the presentation. Adding these users to the department simply by selecting OK, or if you've entered something by mistake, you can select cancel to back out. For our training demonstration today, we're going to add a couple of new departments to our agency. We're branching out, we're growing. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of here, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to select new. We are going to be adding a new children's services division. And we'll add users to that later. We're also going to be adding a new adult services division. So I do that by simply just typing in the name in the name field and selecting OK. As you can see, as I add these new departments, they appear in the list. If for any reason a department is no longer valid at our agency and there are no records attached to it, the user can come over and select it in the drop-down and simply select delete over to the right-hand side. Now, we want to use caution when we're deleting anything from SSIS, and we're doing our due diligence to fact check that there are no records associated with this. And once we select delete, SSIS is going to show you a warning message, and it's going to ask you, do you really wish to delete external placement case manager? And if you did, you can select OK, or if you made a mistake, you can again select cancel to back out. And Andrea is going to walk us through locations.
Locations. Location lists in SSIS link agency addresses or physical locations to specific units. Locations will autofill and provide return address information on SSIS documents, including service arrangements, pre-printed vouchers, and service plans. Locations can be added, edited, or removed as needed.
Let's go ahead and talk about locations in SSIS. A location in SSIS admin designates the address of the units assigned to it. Locations should be created before units are created, and you should create a location for each address or physical location in your agency so that each can be linked to that specific unit. For fiscal related tasks, locations are selected on SSIS service agreements and pre-printed vouchers. Like the department, many agencies have more than one location that make up the social services. A list of existing locations displays when selecting the lists and location list. So as identified in our departments video, we can create a new location here, but first we want to make sure that that location doesn't already exist. So you can locate that when you select lists and navigate down to location list. Now again, because this is a training database, we don't have a whole heck of a lot going on here, but we're going to go ahead and show you a little bit about the functionality related to lists. So if I want to take a look at the current location that we have for related to particular units, I can highlight the location in the list and then navigate over to edit to open it up, or again I can double click on that. When I double click on that, that's going to give me the information related to this location, including 3 description fields and up to 3 address lines, along with that city, zip code, and county agency auto-populating under county. Now notice that Minnesota is grayed out as we are offering services in the state of Minnesota, so we cannot change that. Now, as you recall from our previous video, we can add a new location for our children's services unit, and we're going to do that by navigating over here to new, and we are going to enter the new location for children's services. And we'll just keep this simple by adding a simple address. And we're going to say that our adult services building is at a different location too. So we're going to add the information quickly for the adult services building. So I've added that address location for the adult services building quick, and I'll select OK. And now you can see these 2 new locations are populating in our list. If at any time you want to take away one of these locations, you may do so by highlighting them in the list and selecting the delete option. Again, you're going to get that warning. Do you wish to delete? You can cancel to back out. And backtracking a little bit, if information should change about any of these locations in SSIS, that edit feature comes in handy again. Say the adult services building moves locations, you can go ahead and highlight that and select the edit button to bring you back to that information and update the information accordingly, and then select OK to save it. Next up is units.
A unit list is a collection of users that an agency creates based on program area or organizational unit. It is possible for people to be assigned to multiple units. Remember, every agency has their own naming convention, so check with your mentor or coordinator prior to making one.
So we've given an overview of departments and locations. Now we're going to talk a little bit about units in SSIS administration. Unit is a collection of users, and you can structure a unit around a program, for example, children's mental health, adult CD, or as an organizational unit like children's services. We're going to show you how to add a new unit. But first, again, you can add that new unit under Create, or you can explore existing units at your agency from your lists option. So when I clicked on the unit lists, this is a current unit list from our agency in our training database. Now, again, this is probably going to look a little different at your agency, as you probably have a lot more to choose from. If we want to create a new unit, again, we have the option to do so by selecting New. We can create the name of the unit up here at the top field. And because we've created departments already, we can select a department to assign this unit to. So we're going to click the drop down and we're going to say Adult Services, Children's Services, external placement case manager, social services, or the SSIS default. The location, we already created those, so we're going to select the drop down. This is why we want to create our locations in advance, because we want to assign a location to this unit. So we're going to say that this is part of the social services department, and we're going to add that location. And then we can also select a work group access limit from the drop down. This assigns the scope of information work groups the associated staff members of this unit will have access to. So right now it's defaulting as department, but we can assign this unit restriction access limit, I should say, to the assigned worker, the unit, or unrestricted. So working from top to bottom, the assigned worker access limit will allow the worker to only see work groups and related information to which they are assigned. Assigning at the department level allows the worker to see work groups and related information for anyone assigned to the same department. Assigning access limit at the unit level will allow the worker assigned to see work groups and related information of users assigned to the same unit. And then if we were to select unrestricted, it would allow workers to see anything within SSIS. Let's go ahead and select department. And again, as we showed you on the department screen, we can assign users by adding them with the add button. When we add, we'll get a list of users at our agency that we can select individually or multi-select using that multi-select functionality. And we can add supervisors to the unit as well by selecting the add button, and we'll get a list of users at our agency that are supervisors that we can add as supervisors for this unit. Again, we can select individuals and then select OK. I'm just going to cancel out of here, and we are going to start to assign those new locations to our already existing units in SSIS. As you know, our social service agency is branching off into children's services and adult services. So to highlight the functionality of changing the department and location, we can just double click again or select edit over here on the right side. Now again, right now the Adult Protection Services unit is associated to our main office at the Government Center, but we do have a new Adult Services department, so I'm going to go ahead and select the drop down and select Adult Services. And as you may recall, we added that new Adult Services building location, so we're going to change the location here to the Adult Services building. Here's a list of our assigned users in existence and those assigned supervisors as well. To save these changes, I'm going to go ahead and select OK. To not save them, I'm going to select Cancel. Again, we go through all of our other adult services that are moving and change the department and location as well. And we would do the same likewise for our new Children's Services division by going in and selecting the Children's Services department as well as that new location. Again, if at any time you entered a unit in error or you need to delete a unit, you can select the delete option over here. There may be certain requirements to be able to delete units. My understanding is that if there's any existing records tied to any of the locations, departments, or units in SSIS, you will not be able to delete those.
Roles. Roles contain the SSIS security functions that are directly linked to what you can do in SSIS. A user is assigned to a role according to their duties or responsibilities. Roles can be customized and very specific to a job title and can be edited at a later time. A role cannot be deleted if there are users associated with the role. Creating a limited number of roles makes the security administration more effective and manageable. Functions are actions directly linked to what a user can and cannot do or access in SSIS. Functions can be added or removed from a role. There is a report that you can run that will tell you who has the available functions.
All right, and then listed on this slide is just a link to the SSIS administrative functions job aid that's found on the SSIS resource page under worker documentation and admin. And then I just wanted to highlight a couple of default activities that are listed functions in SSIS. We have the worker default activities, and those allow access to predefined menu options solely based on worker functions. And then we also have the physical default activities, and that allows access to predefined menu options solely based on basic physical functions. And then we put a screenshot down here to show you what appears in that application bar of SSIS when these worker and physical default activities are both assigned to a worker. They're going to see this SSIS worker physical notation in their application bar. And here's a little bit more about roles and functions in SSIS. Let's now talk about roles in SSIS. As identified on the slide, roles contain the SSIS security functions directly linked to what you are able to do and view in SSIS. A user is assigned a role according to the duties and responsibilities that they possess at the agency. Roles can be customized and very specific to a user or a job title. Creating a limited number of roles makes the security administration more effective and manageable at your agency. Let's go ahead and navigate to our lists menu option and select role list. When we did that, we get a populated list of all of the roles that are assigned at our agency. We have roles such as case aide, contracted employee, child protection social worker, and on down the list. We have the search function here if we have multiple roles selected at our agency. They're listed alphabetically in the list, or you can search for them by typing the name of the role in the search list. Let's take a look at the case aide role. When I double click on the case aide role, you'll see the role menu with the name of case aide at the top. Again, this screen allows for individuals to assign users by selecting the Add button and navigating down a list of users to assign. There are other ways to assign users to roles, and we'll talk about that again later in the demonstration. When I select the case aide role, we see a list populate at the bottom of the screen under the profile section. You see a section labeled available functions, and you see a section labeled assign functions. This case aide is assigned the following functions that are listed on the right-hand side of the screen. Workers will want to take note of any new functions that come out in relation to an SSIS release that may pertain to the case aide role. And when those new functions become available, or if the agency decides that the case aide needs more functions added to their role, they can do so by multi-selecting in the list of available functions over to the left, or individually selecting the new role and adding it to the case aide's assigned functions. And you can save this by selecting OK. Say you accidentally entered an available function to an assigned function. You can highlight that and you can you can remove that as well, and it'll push it back over to the available functions list. Taking this learned functionality, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this case aids role. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new role at our agency titled SSIS Coordinator. So first I'm going to do a search to ensure that SSIS Coordinator doesn't already exist. No data to display is a clear indication that we do not have that role set up in SSIS. So to set up a new role, I'm going to navigate over here to New, and I'm going to title this role SSIS Coordinator. Now, if we want to quickly assign functions to this particular individual, and we already have a role at the agency that is similar to what we want this SSIS coordinator to be able to do, we can go under the profile section of the screen and select a current role from the list functions for role dropdown. So we're going to say, okay, we want this SSIS coordinator to have a lot of the similar functions that our case aid has. So we're going to select the case aid. Now over here is the available functions, and we can add all of those available functions for a case aid to the assigned functions of our new SSIS coordinator position. Now, if we feel like there are additional functions that we want to assign outside of the case aid role, then we can navigate back to the top of our list and say show all functions. And what's going to appear over here on the left-hand side of the screen is the available functions that are not assigned to that case aid role that we want to assign to our coordinator. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to navigate up and down this list, and we are going to assign what we want this SSIS coordinator to have access to. For intents and purposes of this training, I'm just going to select Add All, and they're going to jump from the available functions over to the assigned functions. So as you can see, there's not much that this SSIS coordinator will not be able to do or view in SSIS. To get a detailed list and definitions for all of these assigned functions, you're going to navigate to the SSIS resource page and SSIS worker documentation. Under Admin, you're going to navigate to the SSIS administration functions list. This is a current and complete list of all available functions in the SSIS worker fiscal application, along with their definitions. To save this new role at our agency, we're going to select OK. Now, if you look at the list of available roles at the agency, the SSIS coordinator role appears in our list. There is the option to edit current roles as well. So we just select those roles from the list and select the edit option. And there's also the option to delete roles as well. Agencies will want to consistently evaluate their roles and visit the roles list frequently. As indicated at the beginning of this training video, I said that sometimes there are new functions that are packaged in an SSIS release that perhaps you want some of these roles to have access to. And you'll go ahead and visit this available functions screen intermittently at the time of release and add those functions, those new available functions, to specific roles at your agencies at your discretion. I wanted to take a second here to pause for questions to see if there's any questions related to the information that we've covered so far. And of course, it's webinar day, and my computer is saying that software changes are needed. You know, I mean, are there any questions, Cassie, that are coming through?
We have two things in the chat. Carrie brought up Under units and assigned workers, there are lots of DHS workers as ZZDHS and then the
Yep.
name. And she asked if they should be removed from the list. I did respond to her in chat, but I wanted people to take note that no, please do not remove them from the list. Those are DHS workers. They are active, and that's just how the DHS workers show up in the county databases. And DHS employees take care of those and remove them as needed. So they just look funny. And then we had another couple questions. Terry had a question. If you have more than one role in SSIS and you can only have one function or one role, what do you suggest to have as a role? Such as if you are both the coordinator and the mentor and a case aide, what do you suggest?
I would, because you can only have one role, you'll want to make sure that you are assigning all of the functions that you're going to need to be able to navigate an SSIS and provide the assistance that you're going to provide. So, I mean, the naming convention really is kind of up to you at that point then, so that, you're naming it in the list so you can find it in the list that's created that pertains to your particular role. So if you have multiple functions, you're going to want to title that role something specific for you and then assign the functions necessary. Anyone else have any suggestions?
Yeah, I was gonna say that this is Marsha. I was gonna say the same thing, Eric. I think ultimately, Terry, you'll need to create a role that has all those particular functions that you need. So, yep, you can just have the one role. So you always want to make sure that you have all the functions needed for that one role, even if that role, overlaps various responsibilities such as coordinator, mentor, and case aide.
I agree.
Yeah. And then, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. I was going to move on to the next question, but if you have more, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as you're creating that role, if the role isn't already created, then you can go to those other individual roles in that list functions for role and just add all of the functions that are assigned to those individual roles. Like, for example, if you need the role of the case aide, you can navigate to case aide and add all of those functions and then go to the next role and add all of those functions too. Maybe what I'm saying is confusing, so I probably should have just held back. Go ahead, Cassie.
No, I think I get what you mean. So if there's already a coordinator role created, you can go to the list functions for the coordinator role and add all of the functions for the coordinator role and say there's a mentor role created. You can add all of the functions for the mentor role and a case aide role created. You can add all of those functions. So you have all of those functions created for your specific role, Terry. And then you'd have all of what you need for your specific role. You might need a custom role, is what I'm hearing. Yeah, and then maybe you just name it Terry's case aide role or whatever. Maybe it's just Terry's role.
Yeah, there you go.
We actually have seen things named like that in SSIS. You get to customize what fits the needs of your agency. So, the next question is, what was the name of the report that can be ran for admin functions?
I don't have the answer readily available at the top of my head, but I know that there is a report and we were going to cover some of those reports in the next webinar in April. So if one of our other SMEs that are on the call here can,
Yep,
if
I will
there's
look
a
it right up.
desk,
I've got it.
yeah, okay.
You can find that report under administration, under tools, general reports, and its security functions.
Thanks, Andrea.
All right.
So tools, general reports, and security functions in SSIS admin. You're not going to find that in the general reports in the actual application. You're going to have to go into the admin application to find that report.
So Mary's asking, is there any other way that state users can access what they need without adding them to all units the county has? This makes it very difficult to run general reports as they are included in the reports. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe that's something we can bring up.
Yeah, Cassie, this is Marcia. I added a comment in there. So I believe most of the reports that you're referring to, although I'm not positive which ones specifically, there's usually ways that we can do some filtering out, like especially if it's a grid type report, there's ways to pull those out of there or to order things so that they're at the bottom and they can be pulled off. But if you're having trouble with anything specifically, any of those reports, if you want to send those in, I can take a look at those and see if there's something I can help with.
Thanks, Marcia.
Yep.
And then one more, if there's duplicate functions from two different roles, does that cause an issue when you choose add all? I don't think it'll add it twice.
Mm-mm.
No, I don't think that will cause
Nope.
it to add it twice. So no, it won't cause an issue. That's a good question though.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all we have for questions right now.
All right. So we're going to move on to adding a new user profile in SSIS. SSIS administrators create and edit user profiles from user search under lists in SSIS administration. And we're going to show you that functionality here as we navigate through the rest of this presentation. User profiles contain basic information, assigned roles, program restrictions, qualifications, and other details for each user. I wanted to list out some of the functions that are needed by an SSIS administrator or a security administrator at an agency in order to be able to add person or edit person. So before an individual can set up a new user in SSIS admin, they must have a combination of functions assigned to their role. Functions needed to administer the user profile screen in SSIS admin are administer system and edit person. Functions needed to reset a user's password are administer system and password reset. Functions needed to administer profiles and manage passwords are administer system, edit person, and password reset. And then finally, for the whole shebang, functions needed to administer user profiles, edit roles, and manage passwords. The user will need administer system, edit person, edit staff and roles, and password reset. To access the user search, we're going to log into the SSIS administration application and select lists in the Windows toolbar. And then we're going to select user search as shown in that screenshot. There are three types of searches you can do once you get to the user search. You can do a name search, which will find current workers by name. You can do a department search, which will find workers assigned to a specific department. And you can do unit searches, which finds workers assigned to a specific unit. And there's a hint on this slide to uncheck active workers only to include inactive workers in your search results if you wish to do so. So that is in the screenshot kind of over here to the right of the name fields. You can uncheck that box. And then to create a new user, once you've done a search in your agency and you haven't found that person, you can go to the action menu, any way to create an action menu in SSIS, and select that new user option. And Andrea is going to talk a little bit about some of the things you're going to need in order to set that user up.
Andrew, you may still be muted. Go ahead and check, please. We don't hear you.
There's a lot of information needed to set up a new user. Some agencies make a checklist with all the information needed prior to the setup. This makes it easier when you go to set up the user. Some checklists may include first and last name, title, email, SSIS user ID, entity, employee type. If a temporary role, what's the date range? Please know that this will supersede a regular role if you have both selected. Worker function scope, if it's an intake worker or not. Restrictions, if any, apply. Department or departments assigned to. Unit or units assigned to. And units or units supervised, if there are any.
So the first section of the user profile screen is we're going to talk about this upper left-hand corner. We're going to enter the new user's name first. You can use, this video is showing you how to access that user and add a new user again. So we're going to navigate up to that action menu and select new user. And we have the option of adding a prefix like brother, doctor, father, judge, etc. And then we're going to enter that first and that middle and that last name. We encourage agencies to use that middle name when we have two users with the same first and last name. You can enter a suffix if needed, like first, second, third. And then we're going to enter a title, Social Services Coordinator, for this particular training video. We want to enter that email that we're going to get from that checklist that Andrea was talking about so that we can send this new user their username and password when they're set up in the system. And then we're going to set up that phone number. The SSIS user ID we're going to talk a little bit about in a couple minutes or a couple seconds here. The next section we're going to talk about is the staff ID, the entity, and the employee type. The SSIS staff ID is auto-generated and assigned by SSIS. And we're going to select the entity in this video that the employee is employed by. Selections include social services, public health, veterans services, mental health, and corrections. For this video, we're going to select that this person is a social services staff, and then we're going to select their employee type. Current selections are county and tribal employee, contractor, volunteer, external placement case manager, state employee, or collaborative worker. For this video, we're going to select that county and tribal employee. One thing to note is that the entity and employee type help identify if a user's time is included in state reporting. The next section of the user profile screen is this bottom portion that has to do with regional treatment centers and mental health adult initiative. We're going to select yes or no if the user is part of the mental health adult initiative. And then if the employee type above that question is state user or state employee, then the fields for mental health adult initiative and regional treatment center employee are required, and we can answer those questions. And if RTC employee is selected yes, then you'll have to select the host county, which is down at the bottom. We're going to change it back to county and tribal. The next section is the role section. So we talked a little bit about roles and setting those roles up in advance. And this is one way you can add a pre-existing role to an individual at your agency. So So again, a role contains the SSIS security functions that are directly linked to what this user is able to do in SSIS. We're going to select the role for this individual as the new SSIS coordinator at our agency. So he's going to have all of those functions that we assign to that role. And then we have that temporary role, which Andrea talked about. If we want this person to take on a temporary role, such as like supervisor, we can enter a from and to date in the from and to date, and that's going to supersede the role that's above that. The next portion of the screen we're going to talk about is the workgroup function scope. We're going to select the workgroup function scope for this user, and this selection provides security to the amount and type of data the worker can view in SSIS. We have no access for users who are exiting the agency. We have assigned workgroups for users to only be able to see assigned workgroups at the department level, workgroups at the unit level, or completely unrestricted. And then we're going to want to note whether this person has the ability to edit work groups by selecting yes or no in the workgroup edit allowed field, which is right here. So we're going to say that John is able to edit work groups, but you can select no if you don't want John to edit work groups. Then we have our intake worker scope. This is a lot like the workgroup function scope. The intake worker scope provides security for all workers who create intakes in your agency and is similar to the workgroup function scope. We have that no access assigned work groups, department, unit, and unrestricted. And then we're going to select unrestricted for John, and then we're going to want to assign him an intake unit as well. From the dropdown, we can select any one of those units that we had set up as a unit for our intake unit. And then if the intake worker scope fields are not completed and the worker creates an intake work group, we're going to talk a little bit about this later. That intake work group is assigned to the SSIS default, and the default is assigned on county preferences, which we're going to talk a little bit about in the next presentation for SSIS admin. Then we have the reporting section down here. We're going to select the appropriate county or tribe under county of service. And then this field over here labeled staff activity required. Those are placeholders for future design work for staff activity. This field would indicate whether a user is responsible for time reporting at their agency. However, as of right now, this information is not currently tied to the staff detail report or recognized in SSIS. And then we have the final section down here for documents. If we want John to be listed on our agency documents or listed as a local agency contact, we're going to indicate yes. If not, we can select no. And then if John has any credentials that we want to tie to those documents, we can add those into the document credentials field here down at the bottom. If John were a licensed social worker, we could add in the LICSW, et cetera, et cetera. Any titles we want next to John's name on documents. I also want to go back a little bit to this portion of the screen here. The email and the phone number will tie to documents as well. So the email that you have entered on this screen will fall into certain documents in SSIS as well as the phone number. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to the rest of the user profile setup? Is everybody still awake? Everybody take a drink of coffee. Here we go.
There's nothing in the chat right now.
All right, thanks. Okay. Oh, Jill, has raised a hand. What's up, Jill? Or did you do that by mistake? Sometimes people raise their hand and meant to do an emoji. There it goes. All right, moving on. We're going to talk a little bit more about setting up that user profile. And as you navigate away from the user themselves, the next tab you'll see in the user profile screen is program restrictions. The program restrictions tab indicates which programs the worker cannot access. If a program is selected on this tab, the user cannot view workgroup information associated with that program. So if you wanted to restrict John from seeing anything in Children's Services, you can place a check mark next to Children's Services. This also has the functionality of selecting all. If you don't want John to have access to any programs, you can select all. And there's remove all functionality as well. So when a user leaves the agency, you can come in here and remove all. So that all of these screens are blank after a user leaves the agency. The next tab I want to talk about are those department assignments. We have those departments that are listed in our training database. Obviously, this is going to look a little bit different at your agency. You're going to assign this particular user to the departments you want to assign this user to under this tab. And I think I saw a question pop up. Do we want to address that?
Yeah, it's from Sonia.
Okay.
She says, do you have recommendations about access workers should have to other units, or is it strictly an agency decision? Good question.
I think the overarching advice we can give from the DHS standpoint is to use your discretion as to what you feel that those particular individuals really need. But it really does ultimately lie with the agency on how they set up their departments and units and who they want to have access to them.
And this is Cynthia. I would just add that, to make sure to be mindful of that minimum necessary and that just when you're making those determinations.
Thanks, Cynthia.
And we have one more question from Carrie. I don't add new users often and probably won't remember staff activity required is not functional at this time. Where can I find this information when adding a new user? And that should be on the SSIS worker documentation page, and we can get a link. Actually, if you scroll up further in the chat, there's a link to the worker documentation page that Marcia dropped in the chat. I believe there's a nice PowerPoint on there that Eric did a little ways back. Oh,
I
there you go.
updated the PowerPoint to go along with this presentation as well on the SSIS worker documentation page to kind of reflect the information that we're covering today in the order that we're covering it today. So that's been updated as of this month.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep. We have unit assignments as well, which operates a lot like that department assignments tab. We're going to assign individual workers here. So if you remember all the way back at the beginning of this presentation where you could add users as you set up the units under the units lists, this is the kind of a quicker way to add users to particular units at your agency just by simply adding a check mark next to the pertinent units that they need to have access to. Again, you have that select all and you have that remove all functionality coming in here when a user leaves the agency, and selecting remove all is best practice. And then we also, what Cynthia said, the minimum necessary to do their job, we want to assign them to the units that allow them access to the minimum necessary. We have units supervised, pretty self-explanatory here. If an individual at your agency is a supervisor, we're going to come to the unit supervised tab and place a check mark next to the units that this individual will supervise. Again, select all and remove all functionality is available on this screen. And then we have the qualifications tab. Federal and state policy require that agencies verify when staff are eligible to provide services and claim reimbursement for these services. The qualifications tab is used to document users that are qualified to claim. And in order for healthcare claims to generate, eligible staff must have a qualification entered with a type of healthcare claiming and the appropriate claim category, and qualified must be yes. In addition to healthcare claiming qualifications, this tab enables you to identify staff who are not the primary worker in a work group, but qualified to make monthly contacts with children in continuous placement. So on this slide, we have that child safety and permanency professional who is qualified to make those visits to children in continuous placements. We also have listed in this drop-down healthcare claiming and our new prevention services option, which we will cover in a later webinar when we're ready to train on prevention services. But the basic gist of this tab is that you're going to select the type of claiming that they are qualified for, and you want to make sure that the claiming qualification is yes. The claim category is, if you were to select healthcare claiming under this type dropdown, claim categories would range from CWTCM all the way down to children's mental health and the other different claiming categories you can choose. And then you'll want to put a start date for those claiming qualifications to begin. And when that person fills out time activity reports in SSIS and the worker application, those will create, hits for claiming. And then again, when this person is no longer qualified to claim at the agency, we can come back to their qualifications tab and select no, or provide an end date. And then finally, we have a special studies tab. We'll cover special studies again in a future webinar for SSIS admin part 2. However, if you have a special study set up at the staff level, this is a screenshot of the special studies screen in SSIS, and we do have staff indicated as yes. Then when we come here to the special studies tab on the user profile screen, we can add them to a new special study, and we can add them to this MH test special study, etc. If we don't have any studies at our agency where we want to drill down to the staff level, then this option will not be available when you go to select a special study. And again, like I said, we'll cover special studies in the future. Importance of selecting department and unit. If no departments or units are selected on the department's assignments or the unit assignments tabs, access restrictions are determined by the workgroup function scope and intake worker scope sections of the user profile screen. So if there's nothing selected under here, the scope will be what's selected on the user profile screen. If workgroup scope is department or unit and no departments or units are assigned, the user won't be able to access any workgroups. If the intake worker scope is department or unit and no intake unit is selected, intakes will default to the SSIS default scope selected on county preferences. And this screen is just showing that the county preferences screen where default intake unit is selected. If there were no units selected up here, it's going to default to what's selected on county preferences. And then just a note here that case management and assessment and intake work groups can be restricted individually. When access is restricted at the work group level, Depending on the workgroup access restriction, users may not be able to view the information regardless of the selection on their user profile in SSIS administration. And then just wanted to point out here that child maltreatment reports that have transferred from another agency, as well as MARC reports, appear in the unassigned intake search and are assigned to the SSIS default unit. It is important for individuals who disposition these intakes to assign themselves, then navigate to the Workgroup tab and assign the applicable unit and access restriction, as the transferred workgroups do not automatically know how to assign themselves under your agency structure. And then hint, again, access restrictions set at the workgroup level trumps access restrictions set on the user profile screen. And we are quickly running out of time, so we're going to go through the next section here. We're going to talk about setting up the credentials in SSIS. Once you have all of the information entered on the user profile screen and you've applied any restrictions and assignments up here in these tabs above, we're going to navigate to the credentials tab on that user profile screen again. Some of the information that was entered on the user profile screen will import into the staff information fields of the Active Directory credentials screen, including the SSIS user ID if entered. However, we can also select suggest user IDs and pick from a list of suggested user IDs that SSIS offers us, and we can click on one of these radio buttons and select OK. And then that will be our SSIS user ID. So I'm going to show you a quick video here that shows this process in action. So we're navigating to the credentials screen, and we have our SSIS user ID suggested. And we note that this user does not exist in the Active Directory. And we're going to create an Active Directory login. Once we do that, the Active Directory information over on the right-hand side of the screen, which is being highlighted right now, will appear. And this is not editable at the agency. And then we're going to want to give the individual the Active Directory groups. This is going to provide them with those apps that you see in Azure or those apps that you see in Horizon, depending on what platform you're using. I think most everybody is on Azure right now at the county level, but just wanted to point out that this doesn't really do what we see in Active Directory groups justice, because this is our training database. There is a slide in the presentation that shows you like these H55 and the G46. If you see HZN, that's going to point, this app is going to point to Horizon. If you see Azure Desktop, or it's going to point to Azure. So you want to make sure that you're providing the icons to connect to the appropriate platform that you're launching SSIS from. And then we're going to enable the user, and we're going to reset the password to send that individual their new password. And you're going to get that password sent message. And then that individual is going to receive an email with their user credentials, their username, as well as that initial password. And when they first log into SSIS via Azure or Horizon, they're going to use those credentials. And then they can change the password if they'd like. So I'm just going to flash forward here to this particular screen that I was referring to. Again, we have the AVD, which is that Azure Virtual Desktop. That app is going to point to Azure. And then we have HZN, that's going to point to Horizon. All right, one way to know if a user is set up in the Active Directory is to navigate to your column field chooser in SSIS admin on the user screen, and then navigate down to the Active Directory indicator and place a check mark in that box. This first screenshot up here is showing you that there is no Active Directory credentials for this particular user. However, after the user is set up in the Active Directory, you'll see a Y, and that is an indication that that person is active in the Active Directory. Included in this presentation, and I won't belabor this, are some other action menu definitions on the credentials screen that you can familiarize yourself at your leisure. And these are also part of that presentation that's on the SSIS documentation, worker documentation page. Now, we just want to cover this real quick, that changing a logon due to a legal name change, you're going to navigate to SSIS administration and conduct that user search to find that individual. And you can change the user's name on the user screen as shown over here in the left-hand side. Navigate to credentials, and we're going to remove the Active Directory logon. The user notes section will display the user does not exist in the Active Directory. And then we're going to repeat the steps to create that Active Directory logon with that new name. We're going to enable the user, and we're going to do that reset password option as well to send that user their new login credentials. And if you ever get stuck on, some of these or some of the information around credentials or users, you can always reach out to the help desk and they can walk you through. And then finally, we wanted to talk a little bit about inactivating a user's Active Directory credentials. Again, you can search for them in the SSIS admin tool and remove their Active Directory logon. The fields within the Active Directory information section will show blank over here. And a message is sent to the SSIS help desk that a user has been removed from the Active Directory. And then this is where that ZZ stuff comes into play. When a user leaves an agency, we have often suggested that they put ZZ right before their last name so that they will drop to the bottom of any active user lists. We cannot delete users from SSIS because they're tied to records. Some of those records will purge, some of them will not. But that's why users will see, or SSIS administrators will see this ZZ option, is just to bring them to the bottom of the list. And then we want to make sure that we come over here to their role and we select none. We go to their work group function scope and we select no access. And then we go to their intake worker scope and we select no access. You can go through these tabs up here and remove their access to these departments and unit assignments, etc. And that's just kind of a flash in the pan demonstration of SSIS admin part 1. The next time we come together, which will be in April, we'll go into more detail about some of those physical activities that you can do in SSIS admin, as well as the county preferences and some of the tools you can use and reports. So I'm going to hand it back over to Cassie to see if there's any questions before we hand it back to Ross.
We did have one question, and it was from Lori. Oh, we got a couple questions coming in. And Mary had a question first. I may have missed this. Can you go over the qualifications / type child safety and permanency professional option? Or is there some documentation for this on when it should be used, etc.?
So the child safety and permanency option on the qualifications tab is to indicate staff that are able to visit children in continuous placement that are qualified to visit children in continuous placements, but may not be the primary claiming entity on that case. And that's all I have uncovered in my research of that option on the qualifications tab.
I don't have more right now. Mary, you could always send in a ticket. We can get you more on that too. Then we have another question from Lori. When removing them from the Active Directory, will that make them not show up all the time? So like, I'm assuming you mean like show up on lists when you're choosing staff or the worker. I think removing Active Directory does help with that. Also removing roles.
Yeah, I was just going to add on that, Cassie. No, for Active Directory, that wouldn't make any difference to if they show up on those lists, like in other locations, like when you're looking for others caseload list or those types of things. It's really primarily the role. So if you remove that role, you change that to none before you've like transferred work groups, suddenly you can't find that person to look up their caseload list. I think that's what she's talking about. But Active Directory wouldn't make a difference on that. We know that because like when you add an external worker, you don't add Active Directory for those. And yet you still see them on the various lists.
That also kind of goes back to when Eric was talking about putting the ZZ is to get everybody towards the end of the list. So then that way you aren't seeing them.
That makes sense.
Yeah, great point too.
That makes sense. Heidi's reminding people to sign up for the part 2. She put the link in the chat. And we have another question from Terry. If you remove a worker from the directory before all work groups have been transferred to another worker or closed, what happens to them? Just ends out the worker's name. If that happens and you don't have oh, sorry, I moved my chat thing. If that happens and don't have a work group list before making an active, how do we know what work groups they had?
It sounds like, Terry, you're kind of asking about that issue that comes up when you change the role. Not really, I don't believe Active Directory is going to change that for them showing up. What I used to do is I would go back and re-put a role in there just so I could find them and then transfer those work groups. Another good rule of thumb is before removing that role and changing it to none when you're ending the worker is to first check that all of the work groups have been transferred.
Perfect. One more question. When you change the role to none, the worker's names still show up on the list, is what Cindy is saying.
Which list? Maybe send that in, Cindy, on which list you're talking about, because usually that's usually the trick of making sure that they don't have a role assigned.
The list is always going to show the name for background purposes of, history when it comes to, you're going to see their name. That's why, again, we go back to the using the X or the ZZ to move them to the bottom of the list so you don't have to see them.
And some lists you have the option to show active workers or to check a radio dial whether or not you're going to see active workers or not. It depends on what screen you're in as well. But I think for reports, you can scroll down far enough and see like your ZZ workers that you've changed, whether they have a role or not.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think the point is that, right, it depends on the list. Like if we're talking about a drop down to assign somebody, you usually can't assign workers who don't have a role any longer. But yes, you're right. Good point. That's what a good reason to put ZZ to move them to the bottom of those lists so you're not seeing them as options.
And Vicky has a good question. Is it because the work group has them and that trumps the role setting? Kind of. They're always going to be tied to that work group. I mean, we have to keep that historical data.
Mm-hmm.
Need that data integrity there.
All right. If you have any more questions, please feel free to jot them down and send them into Heidi or send them into the help desk, and we can address them at the next presentation. As you can see, there's a ton of information to cover related to SSIS admin, which is why we changed it to a two-part series. I know I kind of flew through this stuff today, but this will be posted on the Child Welfare Training Academy website, which Ross will guide you to in just a second. I want to thank everybody for their attention. And we are going to turn it over to Ross to end our session today.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, this outro is going to be real quick since we have very limited time here. So, as always, remember you have your SSIS resource page on Partner Link where you can find or send your folks that you support to get information on all of this SSIS stuff. So, keep that in mind. Go ahead and hit the next slide for me, Eric. Next coffee talk I'm sorry, the resources. If you have any information related to this coffee talk, please reach out to the SSIS help desk. And if you want to view any of the coffee talks webinar recordings, you can always go to the Minnesota Child Welfare Academy SSIS training site. Next slide. Save the date. As we mentioned several times, part 2 is coming Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024. Set your calendars and please RSVP. And that's
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
I want to thank everybody that put this presentation together and delivered it. And thank you all for joining. Stay golden, Minnesota. Radio Ross out.